And thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm Don Ma. Just a few China-related stories to start off the episode. The country has seen an uptick in respiratory illnesses and clusters of pneumonia in children. Doctors, public health researchers are talking about whether there needs to be international alarm. Here's a closer look.
Hospitals in China are seeing a surge in respiratory illnesses and clusters of pneumonia in children. The recent outbreaks in the country, where COVID emerged in late 2019, have attracted the global spotlight, after the World Health Organization asked China for more detailed information last week. Here's what we know about the surge and why health experts are saying there's no evidence for international alarm. The rise in respiratory illnesses comes as China braces for its first full winter season since it lifted strict COVID-19 restrictions. Some social media users have posted photos of children receiving intravenous drips in hospital, while local media have posted videos of crowded hospitals. A Chinese health official said the outbreak is caused by known pathogens and that there is no sign of new infectious diseases. Data suggests the increase is linked to the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, along with the circulation of known pathogens such as Mycoplasma pneumoniae. That's a common bacterial infection that typically affects younger children. Doctors in China and experts abroad are not too worried about the outbreaks, noting many other countries saw similar increases in respiratory diseases after easing pandemic measures. Chinese authorities say they will open more pediatric outpatient clinics to ensure more elderly people and children receive flu vaccines and encourage people to wear masks and wash their hands.
Ratings agency Moody's cut its outlook on Beijing's credit ratings to negative from stable on Tuesday. This is the latest sign of mounting global concern over the impact of surging local debt and a deepening property crisis on the world's second largest economy. Here's more.
Moody's cut its outlook on China's government credit ratings on Tuesday. The ratings agency downgraded it from stable to negative. It reflects global worries about China's economy. Moody's said it sees growing evidence Chinese authorities will need to give more financial support for debt-laden local governments and state firms. That, in turn, the agency says, risks China's fiscal, economic and institutional strength. It's also cited an ongoing crisis in the country's property sector, where giants like Evergrande have huge liabilities. After the statement, a source said China's major state-owned banks stepped up dollar selling. The move by Moody's was the first change of its China view since it cut its rating by one notch 6 years ago. The agency said it expects the country's annual GDP growth to slow to 4% next year and in 2025. It also expects growth to average 3.8% from 2026 to the start of the next decade. China's finance ministry said it was disappointed by Moody's decision. It further said the economy will keep its rebound and positive trend, and property and local government risks are controllable.
And it seems like Western startups want to break China's dominance in rare earths refining. They're racing to create faster, cleaner, and cheaper ways to refine rare earths to power our electronics and to rival China, who dominates the market right now. Rare earths are made up of 17 metals used to make magnets to power our electronic devices, from electric vehicles to cell phones. According to the International Energy Agency, China currently controls 87% of global rare earths refining capacity. It uses a standard called solvent extraction, which is considered an expensive and toxic process. Several startup tech firms are now boasting about their processes, which they say are innovative and better for the environment to compete against China. So far, though, none of the companies have launched commercially, but they are hopeful on Chinese batteries, which could increase the cost of buying an electric car as soon as next month. The Biden administration aims to cut subsidies for vehicles that contain Chinese-made components or are made by a company with strong ties to the Chinese regime. New guidelines from the U.S. Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, and Department of Energy prohibit parts made by, quote, foreign entities of concern. This includes companies based in China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran, or with strong connections to their governments. Starting next month, vehicles with these components will no longer be eligible for a full tax credit of $7,500. U.S. stocks ended lower on Monday with shares of Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, and Amazon all losing ground ahead of employment data later this week that could give further clues on the Federal Reserve's monetary policy path. Here's a quick recap of markets.
U.S. stocks ended lower on Monday after a 5-week rally as investors turned cautious ahead of jobs data this week that could alter expectations about when the Federal Reserve might cut interest rates. The Dow dipped 0.1%, the S&P 500 shed 0.5%, and the Nasdaq lost more than 0.8. Traders widely expect the central bank to keep rates unchanged at its meeting next week, as does Kevin Mon, president and chief investment officer at Hennion & Walsh Asset Management, who believes one more rate hike is enough to push the economy into a recession.
However, if they stop here, keep rates where they are for the first 2 quarters of next year, navigate through this expected economic slowdown, and then start to cut interest rates towards the second half of the year, not only could they actually navigate a soft landing, but that could lead into an ultimate economic recovery and good returns for both stock and bond markets over the next 3 years when interest rates are forecasted to come down by nearly 3% by the Federal Reserve's own projections.
In company news, shares of Alaska Air tumbled 14% after the carrier said on Sunday it would acquire the parent company of peer Hawaiian Airlines for $1.9 billion, including debt. Shares of Hawaiian Holdings nearly tripled in value. Shares of cryptocurrency firms such as Coinbase Global, Riot Platforms, and Marathon Digital rallied between 5% and 9% after Bitcoin crossed $42,000 for the first time since early 2022. Megacaps Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, and Amazon all lost ground, but shares of ride-hailing service Uber Technologies rose more than 2% after an announcement on Friday it will join the S&P 500 effective December 18th.
U.S. Supreme Court justices on Monday struggled over whether to approve OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma's bankruptcy settlement. They're voicing concern the deal would shield its wealthy Sackler family owners from lawsuits over their role in a deadly opioid epidemic, while also worrying that scuttling it could harm victims. Here's the report.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday grappled with the controversial bankruptcy settlement for Purdue Pharma, the maker of prescription painkiller OxyContin, and the justices appeared torn over whether the wealthy Sackler family owners should be shielded from future lawsuits. Under the settlement, Purdue's owners would receive immunity in exchange for paying up to $6 billion to settle thousands of lawsuits filed by states, hospitals, people who'd become addicted, and others who have sued the company over misleading marketing of the powerful pain medication. The justices were scrutinizing a challenge to that settlement by the Justice Department, which argued the bankruptcy agreement should not protect the Sacklers. But some members of the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday seemed skeptical. Here's Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
The opioid victims and their families overwhelmingly approve this plan because they think it will ensure prompt payment. So in those circumstances, those narrow circumstances, bankruptcy courts for 30 years have been approving plans like this.
But other justices seemed wary of extending protections to the Sacklers under bankruptcy law. Here's Associate Justice Elena Kagan.
In some ways, they're getting a better deal than the usual bankruptcy discharge because, as Justice Gorsuch indicated, they're being protected from claims of fraud and claims of willful misconduct.
Lawsuits against Purdue and Sackler family members accuse them of fueling the opioid epidemic through deceptive marketing of its pain medication. The epidemic has caused more than 500,000 U.S. overdose deaths over more than 2 decades.
I want to express my family's deep sadness about the opioid crisis.
Members of the Sackler family have denied wrongdoing. Here is David Sackler testifying to Congress in 2020.
Far too many lives have been destroyed by addiction and abuse of opioids, including OxyContin.
The Sacklers have seen their family name removed from major museums as outcry against them built.
I think I can make this the biggest drug in the world.
And watched themselves portrayed as villains in TV dramas such as Dopesick about the epidemic.
They were all little slaps on the wrist with little financial fines.
The notion of shielding the family from liability is an affront to Rebecca Finnerty, who said her son died as a result of opioid addiction.
It's ridiculous that they profited off the deaths of our children and are walking away with that.
Purdue estimates that its bankruptcy settlement, approved by a U.S. bankruptcy judge in 2020, would provide $10 billion in value to its creditors, including state and local governments, individual victims of addiction, hospitals, and others who have sued the company.
Taiwan's Foxconn, the world's largest contract electronics maker and a major Apple supplier, on Tuesday raised its outlook for the fourth quarter on strong year-end sales for the holiday peak. Here's the report.
iPhone maker Foxconn is feeling bullish about holiday season sales. On Tuesday, the Taiwan-based giant lifted its outlook for the fourth quarter. That is traditionally its strongest season, with consumers snapping up smartphones and other gadgets over the festive period. Now Foxconn says the quarter has started better than expected and will beat earlier forecasts of significant growth. The firm doesn't put exact numbers on its predictions. Foxconn is the world's largest maker of electronics for other brands and is the top supplier of iPhones. It says revenue topped $20 billion in November, the second highest figure on record for the month. Consumer electronics, including smartphones, saw strong growth on the year, although that was coming off a low base, with key factories facing lockdowns this time 12 months ago. The company says components and car parts also enjoyed strong growth. Last month, it logged a surprise 11% jump in third quarter profit, but warned that revenue for the full year would be slightly down.
Cryptocurrency-related stocks listed in the U.S. surged on Monday, looking to extend their strong November gains as Bitcoin topped $42,000 to hit a fresh high for the year. Here's more.
Crypto-related stocks surged on Monday as Bitcoin briefly passed $42,000 for the first time since April 2022. The world's biggest cryptocurrency has seemingly cast off the funk that settled over crypto markets following the collapse of FTX and the failures of other crypto-related businesses. It has rallied 50% since mid-October and is up by over 150% so far this year, on course for its best annual performance since 2020. Bitcoin's momentum appears fueled by the possibility of U.S. interest rate cuts and traders betting that the U.S. will soon approve exchange-traded Bitcoin funds. A spot Bitcoin ETF could allow previously wary investors access to crypto via the stock market, ushering a new wave of capital into the sector. The momentum is helping boost companies tied to the cryptocurrency, like MicroStrategy, a Bitcoin investor. Its shares up more than 8% in Monday morning trading. And shares of crypto exchange Coinbase rose 7.5%. The stock is coming off a stellar month, rising nearly 62% in November, even as Coinbase reported a decline in third quarter trading volumes. Investors have also welcomed the settlement of a years-long U.S. criminal probe into Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange and a key cog in the worldwide crypto market. The deal, which saw Binance's founder step down after pleading guilty to breaking U.S. anti-money laundering laws, allows the company to continue operating. Another cryptocurrency, Ether, also rose on Monday, hitting $2,274. Both Bitcoin and Ether, however, remain far below their record highs hit in 2021 of $69,000 and $4,868, respectively.
Shares of Hawaiian Holdings, the parent of Hawaiian Airlines, nearly tripled on Monday after Alaska Air Group agreed to acquire it for $1.9 billion, including debt. Here's a look at the details.
Shares of Hawaiian Airlines' parent company, Hawaiian Holdings, nearly tripled on Monday after Alaska Air agreed to buy the rival airline for $1.9 billion, including debt. The deal comes after Hawaiian shares had lost more than half their value this year due to the impact of the Maui wildfires, high fuel costs, and jet engine recall issues for some of its planes. Alaska and Hawaiian said on Sunday that the deal will expand their networks and offer more choices to passengers. One analyst told Reuters the deal will enable Alaska to grow in the lucrative Asia-Pacific market. while Hawaiian customers can travel nonstop to the U.S. mainland with minimal further investment. However, regulatory resistance to the merger is a possibility. The U.S. Justice Department filed a lawsuit in March to stop JetBlue from buying Spirit Airlines, saying the planned merger would, quote, put travel out of reach for many cost-conscious travelers. Shares of Alaska Air ended down more than 14% at Monday's close.
General Motors' Cruise robotaxi unit could face fines and sanctions over its failure to disclose details of an October 2nd accident in which a robotaxi dragged a pedestrian 20 feet after being struck by another vehicle. A California agency said this. Here's more.
General Motors could face a big fine over an accident involving one of its Cruise robotaxis. The October incident in California saw a pedestrian dragged for 20 feet by one of the vehicles. Now the state's Public Utilities Commission says Cruise could face fines of $1.5 million. There may be additional sanctions over the firm's initial failure to disclose all details of the accident. Last month, the agency said that Cruise took 2 weeks to supply the full video of the event. Separately, GM Chief Executive Mary Barra said Monday that the company's review of the incident would last into the first quarter of next year. She said she was focused on righting the ship at the unit. But analysts say the prospect of fines and other penalties could delay efforts to rebuild trust and restart operations. Cruise suspended all driverless car trips in the US following the accident. The unit's chief executive and chief product officer both stepped down. GM says it has hired a law firm to examine management's handling of the accident and their response to regulators. One investor told Reuters that it would take many months to rebuild trust and resolve the issue.
And now NTD's MSG looks into how AI-generated images are affecting the Israeli-Hamas conflict.
A Palestinian child clings to his cat after a devastating Israeli airstrike. This used to be his home, but now nothing remains but rubble. This image circulated on the web for some time, before someone noticed the cat had 5 legs. The image was a deepfake, one of many deepfakes which have been circulating ever since the war began.
The impact is enormous, right? Because a big part of this unfortunate terrorist attack, if you will, is the propaganda war. So if you have a propaganda war, but in your propaganda war, not only are you manipulating the press, but you're also manipulating images.
AI expert Michael Everest says humans have sight-oriented minds. People are moved by images and may take action because of them. Visual impressions can sway people from one side to another. These fake images include blood-covered babies crying in the middle of wreckage, Israeli airstrikes on civilian neighborhoods, civilians digging through concrete rubble to find their family members. While the image of the 5-legged cat is relatively easy to spot, advancing AI technology will only make the images more convincing.
A trained eye can perhaps find it, but it's very difficult. I mean, you can look at background, you'd have to zoom in, but for the average Joe, we're not going to be able to tell.
Everest says there are tools that can detect whether an image is real or not, but the tools are imperfect, and he says most people likely won't bother using them. Emma Shi, NTD News.
Some Democratic lawmakers are balking at supporting military aid to Israel. They're demanding Israel reduce civilian deaths in Gaza. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the talks, which center around a nearly $106 billion aid package for Ukraine and Israel.
Senator Bernie Sanders and the Democratic senators involved want a change in Israel's military strategy as part of receiving the aid. Sanders says he would support defense systems that protect Israeli citizens from incoming missiles and rocket attacks, but not billions of dollars of what he sees as unconditional military aid. He doesn't support the Netanyahu government continuing what he calls its current offensive military strategy.
Israel is at war with Hamas, not with the Palestinian people. Israel cannot bomb an entire neighborhood just to take out one Hamas lieutenant.
However, Sanders does acknowledge the challenges Israel faces, saying he recognized that the goal of Hamas is perpetual warfare until Israel is destroyed. Other Democrats, like Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, say passing the bill could determine the trajectory of democracy for years to come, adding that the U.S. stands at a historical crossroads.
America's national security is on the line around the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Indo-Pacific. Autocrats, dictators, are waging war against democracy, against our values, against our way of life. That's why passing this supplemental is so important.
Schumer took a procedural step on the Senate floor Monday evening to force a Wednesday vote on the aid bill, but it is unlikely to pass. Meanwhile, some Republican senators are also ready to vote against the Israel-Ukraine aid bill unless it includes major changes in policy at the U.S. border. Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa says she wants more funding for Ukraine, but not without substantial changes to border policy. Senators will hear a final pitch from an aid beneficiary before voting. Senator Schumer wrote on X on Monday that the Biden administration invited Ukrainian President Zelensky to address senators via secure video as part of their classified briefing. Schumer wrote that senators will be able to hear directly from the Ukrainian president precisely what's at stake in the vote. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And that's all for today's NTD Business. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.